And let's get started with the VC panel.
Brilliant. Marty, thank you so much and appreciate everybody's time this morning and coming here. I'm sure you're all aware that right down the street, we've got 50,000 individuals at the JP Morgan conference. So I think COVID's over, right? We got 50,000 people stuffed into a room, possible to get a hotel. Ubers are absolutely brutal to, try and pick up. So I think, what we're seeing here in San Francisco is exactly what we want. We want to see a lot of money in motion. We want to see a lot of VCs get meetings. We want founders like the two gentlemen on my right and left. They're looking for capital. They're building great firms. They're doing all the right things that you want to do when you are in the venture capital business. So let's talk VC for a minute. I mean, some of the oldest VC firms were essentially the direct investment arms of extremely wealthy families. Bessemer Ventures was originally the outgrowth of Bessemer Trust. The Phipps family was also in the steel industry. Thenick, which is an outgrowth also of the Rockefeller family office. These are just old, brilliant names who took their wealth and they put it out into the economy, into different businesses. Some of the best vintage years, and let's talk about vintage years and why they're so important for guys like on my right and left, was 1929, best time to be in the business, 1987, Black Monday, 1999 dot-com bubble. Think about all the down rounds that there were in that era and what a great time would be to be into venture capital and get really good valuations going in. How about 2007, 2008? You had Uber and Airbnb come to market. Then you had the financial crisis of 2015-16, another really interesting time to go into VC. Then you had the cryptocurrency in 2018, coronavirus crash in 2020. If that doesn't tell you that there's absolutely moments when to go into tech, then you need to really get yourself set up with founders, figure out a way to get into VC, meet founders, really understand what it means to be with somebody that really thinks differently and they think long-term and they think really good cutting-edge ideas. Other things to think about that you've got medtech coming up in the next in 2025 through 2030. You've got medical VC. We think investing will be fantastic. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 50,000 people, down the street. Let's talk about unicorns. We hear that word a lot. Your family offices, right? All of you out here are family offices and founders. What is a unicorn? A unicorn means that the valuation of the company has reached $1 billion. Now, it sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't. It's really, done, and it's done many times. Let me throw out some really great names that you would know. How about Instacart? How about SpaceX? How about Mir? How about Gemini? How about Uber? Relax Solutions, Noom. And those of you that, are big Amazon shoppers, like every family in America, was not a unicorn when it came to market. So it just depends upon how you see the market. Long-term investing, is so important, obviously, for that area. Another idea that, we want to make sure that you understand is that incubators. So incubators, and we hear the term a lot, is really just a farm system where you're able to put 15, 20 great companies into a fund. And then there is leadership inside that incubator who helps all of these amazing firms grow. So there's some of the bigger names out there, like Y Combinator is smart. There's incubators, and if you can get yourself into one as a family office and you can start funding them, would be an amazing opportunity for you as a family office. So we also think that the area is important, all right? So if you put a smiley face on the United States, and you think Silicon Valley, Southern California, Boston, Philadelphia, and Miami, that's where the big centric area is for venture capital. So if you, as a family office, are in those areas, do whatever you can to get to meetings, conferences, to meet founders, to meet funds, understand what it means to get into an opportunity where venture capital is raising money. These funds are raising money, and they're spreading it out to all of the underlying businesses and help them grow and come to market. So other ideas that I just want to bring to your attention is names. What are some of the big names out there that you've heard of, but the doors are closed? The doors are closed and you can't get in unless you've got incredible access, somebody, or a friend of a friend can get you in. SoftBank, Tiger Global, DST Global, Excel, General Atlantic, Index Ventures. All of those are big funds that were once open and have closed. So it's very hard to get into the, upper echelon or the Tony funds, but there are smaller funds out there. So if you're doing your research as a family office, K&L Gates is a perfect place to come. They work in the venture capital area. Your job is to try and figure out for your family office for generation 2, generation 3, generation 4, how to keep deploying money and bringing it back into the family. So I've got I've got 2 others behind me. I didn't see them. I'm sorry, Marty. I didn't know they were here. Is that Yana? Yes?
Yes. Hi, this is she.
Oh, how are you? Okay, I didn't know that we had 2 others. I apologize. Yana, welcome. So we've got a great group today.
Hey,
And
Matthew, Wendell's here too. Come on, Matthew. We talked yesterday.
Oh, okay, didn't see you over there, Wendell. How are you? Good morning.
Good
So,
morning.
good morning. So we have Wendell as well. So we've got a full house. I didn't realize, obviously, everybody was behind me.
Switzerland has a bridge just like California.
It's beautiful. Welcome. So
Well,
that's
I'm
really
in
great
Zurich,
news.
but I figured I'd try to fit in with San Francisco background.
That's okay. So let me introduce the fellows on my right and left. Frank here is from STC. They are putting together an amazing company where they are incubating some great businesses underneath them. They're going to then take them to market, spin them out, and put them into the marketplace. They've got a fund that they're trying to raise currently about $150 million. And with that $150 million, they believe that they can really get some good IP advantage. They have about a dozen people inside the company. And Frank, being one of the founders, he's raised probably about $5 billion or more in his career. So he's very good at putting, dollars together and bundling it. On my left, I've got Dr. Sam Perli, who is the Chief Scientific Officer at Thinkhat AI. So what I think makes this unique is that they're in a lot of really smart areas of the healthcare area, in integrating different systems, integrating different, opportunities. Again, an area that I think, for those that are in the family office area can't get to unless you know a founder or get in. So you have to be really, strategic in trying to put yourself in front of the right people. For him, and I think, PhD, molecular biology, MIT, MS computing, again, bringing exactly the knowledge you're looking for at a firm that, is raising money. So a founder. Then behind me, Yanni, partner at Alter Global, leads one of the largest value add businesses, that we have. They support the portfolios. Their job is to make sure that they've got talent development, product development, roadmaps, again, for founders, raising money for them and helping them. And then Wendell. Wendell, how are you today? Nice to see you. Wendell and I had a great talk in the beginning of the week at AmCap Growth Capital, founder and managing partner out of Miami, Florida, currently in Zurich today. He has about 85 different lenders on speed dial. Now, why is that important? Because if you're growing your business and you're a VC, you need access to capital, whether it's family offices, institutions, pension funds, et cetera. He launched his newest fund in 2024. So he works with a lot of the post-revenue firms, pre-profit VCs. He's putting together, I think, a really interesting group of businesses. And again, this is somebody that you want to get to know if you want access to the asset class. So let's just sort of start with you, Wendell. Would you give me just a feel of where you think that the state of the emerging venture capital market is today? And I'm really thinking about investment opportunities, deals, and deal pipelines.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And just as some quick additional background on myself and what we're doing at AmCap, we actually work on behalf of founders. So the founders are our clients, and we are focused on venture debt. So when they are looking to raise debt, which is typically following their equity round 3 to 9 months after that, we will pretty much run an investment banking process, and we go out to those 85 plus lenders and build a competitive marketplace. But Matthew, as you mentioned, as far as VC and where I see things right now, Marty did a great job of kind of highlighting some times where when the market was down is the most attractive time to get in VC. I think a lot of people who are currently in VC funds, they say, oh, valuations are down from when they were previously in 2020, 21, and 2022. But actually, valuations aren't down. They're in line to where they should be. And so where you're coming in right now, if you are looking to invest in VC, there's not a better time, because what you saw was a lot of venture VC-backed startups. They were going public by SPAC, They were going public based on valuation and not actual revenue and actual revenue growth. So if you're sitting there as a family office, a lot of times people see exit as IPO. But exit is not an IPO. Exit is when you decide to sell your shares in a company. So the IPO is great, and you get to ring the bell, or you're at the or at the Nasdaq, or you get to ring the bell at NYSE. But as a family office, what you're really looking to do is see a company go public, and then see those shares go up, and then sell. So I think this is a very interesting time because what you're going to see is the IPO is going to take longer for companies to IPO, but those companies that do IPO are going to see strategic and measured growth after that IPO. So you're not looking at an exit from, I think some of the other panels will talk about exits as far as acquisition, but I think with the real opportunity here is you're looking at exit after IPO. So companies that are actually prepared to go public will go public. Those that are not prepared to go public will stay private longer. They will raise more additional capital, whether it's debt or equity. But I think this is a very good time for family offices to start looking at VC. And Matthew, something that we mentioned, and I apologize, I wasn't able to get you the information on PitchBook, is that there's never been a time where venture capital, if you take the top 50 to 60% of VC funds, have not outperformed, including all their fees, the S&P 500. So I know sometimes family offices get a little worried about lockup period or 7 to 10 years, but you're also
but we haven't covered that. We haven't covered lockup. We haven't covered, the time frame. So let's just stay with the industry for a minute. Let me just shoot over to Yana. Welcome.
Sure.
And something about her, which is amazing. I mean, multiple languages, which means that she's got the ability to talk to multiple founders in multiple countries around the world and really bring, I think, unique products to the table. So would you give us a little bit more background on yourself, Yana? And more importantly, pick up the conversation from Wendell. Let's just talk about where we are right now in DC and what that outlook looks like. So if you would, talk a little bit about your firm and yourself, and then just how you see the outlook from your position.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for having me. I apologize that I'm not with everyone in person, but similar to Wendell, I'm traveling at the moment. I'm in Mexico City. And actually, just before I joined you, I committed to a new company that we're investing in as a firm here in town.
Tell us about that. What do they do? And you as going out into the marketplace, and obviously, your fluency in multiple languages helps you see more than the average bear. Tell us a little bit about how you found this company and how you see their growth.
Of course. So as helpful context, I think in general, our fund, Alter Global, is a pre-seed through Series A fund investing specifically in emerging markets. So though I personally am based in San Francisco, our firm invests across Latin America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. We have been investing for the last 5 years, and we have about 50 million in AUM. Our strategy specifically is to put anywhere from 250,000 to 1 million in our first check into a company, ideally at a sub $20 million valuation, so that we can maximize the ownership for ultimately our LPs and get into a company early. Our team is globally distributed in general. So though I am in San Francisco, helping our founders in particular raise future capital. So once they've raised from us, that are going out to raise their Series A, B, or C, can I put them in touch with the best of funds in the Bay Area? The rest of our team—
Would you consider yourself an incubator?
No, we would consider ourselves an early stage fund, because
early stage,
contrary to some of the structures of some incubators, not all, we want to make sure that from a diligence perspective and the bar that we set for ourselves to invest in companies, we hold it at the very, very highest level. And so typically we're working with founders either post some amount of initial revenue, or if they're a second or a third time founder, we might come in earlier. But otherwise, most of the folks that we invest in emerging markets are actually already working with a meaningful amount of revenue, even when they're raising their pre-seed. And so I think the interesting opportunity that this presents to some of the family offices and folks in the room today is that if historically our sentiment towards emerging markets was one of a lot of perceived risk and lack of market maturity, the way in which these markets have evolved over the last decade is actually showing us statistically over and over again that from a return standpoint, the returns available in these regions are at par with, if not higher, than what you can achieve in markets like the United States or Europe, particularly because more often than not, the founders going out to make that choice of starting a company and investing the next 10 years into it are ones that have already taken a lot of the risk hedge out before they've even started. So that's a bit about
talk
our firm.
talk about where you are right now. So you're in Mexico. Obviously,
Yes.
English, Russian, and Spanish are the, 3 languages that you're fluent in. How did this company come to be? How'd you find this company, and what are you doing there now?
Yes. So the company that we are committing to later today, that we just aligned on as a team, this is a seed stage company based out of Mexico, but operating across Latin America as a whole. So they are a B2B crypto play. Now, what that means specifically in practice is that in today's day and age, there are a number of crypto market makers that are active in Latin America. Let's use Ripple as an example, or even Starlink, Elon Musk's internet satellite company, that are live in Latin America. And in addition to paying, for example, some of their contracts via fiat currency, they also want to process a number of them in stablecoin. So they're not actually transacting it through specific tokens like Bitcoin. Everything is happening in USDC or USDT, so tethered to the US dollar. And what is necessary in order for some of those transactions to take place is for the infrastructure to be built out where there's enough liquidity on both sides. There's enough US dollars and there's enough USDT, or there's enough Mexican pesos and there's enough USDC. So you need a number of liquidity providers to be live in these markets to essentially allow those transactions to take place. And this is a company that is facilitating that integration. So they are working both. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, how did you find them? Right? Because you've got family offices in the room. They're always thinking, okay, I want to go into a fund. I want to work with somebody like yourself. I want to get to a founder. How'd you find these guys? How did they come to you?
So about 75% of the companies that we ultimately invest in are folks that we go out proactively and look for. Oftentimes, these are people that have left larger companies in emerging markets and are now choosing to start something of their own, or they're folks that maybe spent 5, 10, 15 years working in the US at various firms and now want to build something for their home countries. Or there's a lot of folks that we've invested in that come out of GSB at Stanford or HBS at Harvard. Those are folks that now are going home and they want to build something in the tech space for their countries. So we are very proactive about going and finding the folks that we think have that high ceiling, high caliber potential to build something. And then about 25% of the time, we also pursue opportunities that are either inbound to us or referrals from our own founders, et cetera.
So everybody in the room today, you can see how important it is to be with a fund, a group, a company, somebody like Yana, working with Wendell. You can see that you need so much infrastructure, so many smart individuals that are cutting edge, close to all the right business schools, close to the right cities, speak foreign languages, have access to family offices, institutional and hedge funds and private equity money that can funnel it to these great companies. You, as the family office, you're the catalyst, you're the equity, you're the engine behind it. So on my right and left, I've got two founders here. So Sam, welcome. Nice to see you. Good to see you. We're going to do a quick shake hand, say hello to each other.
Yes.
And I think for Sam, as the chief scientific officer and founding member of Thinkhat, AI, he's in a completely different area than I think most people think of when they think about technology. So I want to hear a little bit about your firm and you, most importantly, a founder, but I really want you to talk about, because it's molecular, technologies. And again, that's just so, far and distant from most family offices that think about tech. I want to hear about some of the cutting edge companies that you invest in.
Yeah, thank you. What I want to share with you is honestly, what's happening is a radical change in how we've learned about our own universe, how we process information, and also the technologies we are building. What we are doing at Thinkhat is we are a venture studio at the intersection of artificial intelligence, healthcare, and life sciences. And the reason why we've built this studio is because we want to be at that forefront of innovation that's happening with AI for aging into life sciences and healthcare. I myself have a background in computer science and then went on to do a PhD in molecular biology. And we were at this point thinking, what is it that can be done with what's happening in AI? And we came together. Ravi, our CEO, is also in the audience. And Ravi and I, we had this idea, what if we could use computational skills and tools to revolutionize how we do biological work as well as healthcare? And so that's how we started this company, Thinkhat. It's a venture studio, meaning we ideate, we bring in founders, we co-invent, or we build companies from scratch. We get them all the way to Series A. And when the companies mature, we bring in external CEOs, we get more funds put into the company, and we launch them. And the thesis of what we are doing is essentially using artificial intelligence to revolutionize drug discovery, as well as patient care, patient intake, patient care monitoring once they leave the hospital as well. And
so
yes.
let me ask you a question for the group. So you talked about venture studio. Now, I have not heard that term. What do you mean when you talk about venture studio?
Yes. Well, you might have heard the terms such as incubators, or you might have heard terms such as accelerators. And what a venture studio is essentially, you could think of an incubator on steroids. It is the full stack development of a company. At our venture studio, we have about 150 scientists, engineers, sales, marketing, business development, fundraising teams that are working with the founders to get them all the way, go to market, generate revenue, and get to a place where they can launch a Series A, starting from nothing.
Talk about a full stack.
Exactly.
Again, sort of break it down for those that are family offices. What does it mean, put together the full stack?
Yeah, I can give you a case study. For example, we are at the moment incubating a company in the biological space where we are accelerating drug development. And the way we've incubated this company was we had a few scientists who were just finishing up their work at places like UCSF and Harvard that came to us and said, hey, we wanted to see if we could build a technology using artificial intelligence to accelerate drug development. Now, when they came to us, there was practically nothing except for a little bit of an intellectual property that was associated with their work. So then we sat with them. We have a particular framework that we go through, which has 128 lenses through which we look at whether this is going to be a good technology to go behind, invest, and grow it out. And once it passes that threshold, we got together with these folks. We said, okay, let's get you guys situated in a lab environment away from the university where we can build an IP that is scalable.
But come back to full stack. What does full stack mean?
Yeah, so full stack would mean then, okay, now we have this idea. First, we need to make a proof of concept around this idea, show that there is valuation that's possible. Then we present it at different places where we can test the idea with pharmaceutical companies. We make partnerships happen. We get them to present their proof of concept. And then once we get a little bit of a MOU or a business license kind of deals, then we begin to put more resources into the company because then there is that traction with the go-to-market strategy. And then we scale it up from there.
So let me ask you a question for those in the room. I gave you $5 million 5 years ago. How's my money doing? And more importantly, have I seen exits in the last 5 years in any businesses or companies that you've invested in for the money I gave you back in 5 years ago? How am I doing?
Yes. Well, we are a fresh venture studio. We are just in the business for about a year now.
So
and
my money's not doing so good 5 years ago.
Okay. Yes. We didn't take your money yet. But the way we would compare that is essentially showing valuations, as was mentioned before, right? I think that's the key, especially in life sciences. It's a little bit of a longer play, honestly, but the valuations are also much higher than straight up tech for the comparable kind of traction we gain.
Okay, I'm J&J. When do I come knocking on your door, or when do you come knocking on my door so I can buy that business and get Matthew's money back?
Yes, a typical strategy for exit or partnership would look like we having a viable drug candidate that has passed safety and efficacy kind of phase 1 trials that we set up. Sometimes J&J or other big pharma are interested in just animal studies, if we can show the proof of concept in animals and show improvement in those cases, they're willing to open up a conversation and they would love to partner with us. In fact, in our incubator, we actually have those partnerships where we are situated in San Carlos. We've set up partnerships with several of these big pharma who are interested in kind of sourcing potential candidates to go after, partner with, and bring them to market.
Okay, last question for you, and just one again for the room. Do you ever take talent from the J&Js and the Baxters and the bigger firms? You ever go and sort of try and pick off some of their scientists or pick off some of their great people and bring them in, give them a little bit more money than they're getting at some of those firms to join your firm?
Definitely, I think we
Definitely?
we are as a venture studio, we feel like the best way to market is to have people who have already been there, who've already done that, and who has the know-how. And so we incentivize them. Obviously, paycheck is one way, but they're also incentivized by equity in the companies that they bring to market, etc. And that's a win for them as well because they want to build things themselves. So so we've seen that work really well.
Great, thank you so much. And how are you? Good morning. Nice to see you, Frank. So a couple questions for you is tell me a little bit about, for your firm. I want to hear your edge. What makes you guys different? What makes you guys tick? You're at SDC, you're a founder, you're a firm, you're going to raise $150 million. Your background is phenomenal. What's your edge? What do you bring into the market that somebody else isn't?
Good. Thanks, Matthew. So we bring a couple of things into the equation. We bring a capital light approach, a capital efficient approach to drug development. We do not invest in companies as opposed to Sam. We take a different approach. We invest in the underlying science, the assets at hand that reduces the cost that comes with investing in companies. There are a management layer, there are parallel development projects going on that we do not service with the capital that we deploy. So that's distinguishing factor number one. Distinguishing factor number two is that our lockup period is significantly shorter than a typical VC.
Explain to people what a lockup period is.
So a VC or a PE fund would typically take your money and hold it for 5 to 7 years before they do a true up on that specific fund, and they would pay out any proceeds on that. What we do in turn is to run clinical trials in the early stage, take it through phase 1, and then do an exit to pharma. That exit will generate a dollar amount that we will then pay out as dividends to our equity holders. So that's a very different approach, and our tie-up period, in essence, is as short as 3 years, which would be the typical development cycle for a phase 1 asset.
And how many different Marty?
Can you define what the assets are that you invest in? I mean, is this asset-based lending, or is this
so what we
pseudo equity of some sort?
Good question, Marty. So what we do is we partner with established and typically VC-funded biotechs, and in that partnership we have a contract where we take over the IP, and we then do a development protocol in a joint venture type setting with the IP originator, and run the clinical study for them. So we do the financing, but we also add in drug development capabilities into the equation. That's in essence what we do. So we also partner in order to get the infrastructure in place. We partner with CROs or CDMOs to help us bring assets forward and conduct the actual clinical trials.
So would you go and work with somebody like Wendell? Would you go to Wendell and say, hey, Wendell, we need dollars. You've got access to, 50, 60 different lenders and different asset classes. Do you reach out for your money through somebody like Wendell? Are you doing it on your own? How are you sourcing your money? Because what you're doing takes a lot of money to share, in the upside value with these firms. You're doing your own IP with them. Where are you getting your money? That's always so important that we want to make sure that the VC people understand, or excuse me, the family offices. How does a founder find more money? When do you need it?
Yeah. So you talked about the restrictive access to VC funds, right? We actually provide an asset class, the availability of an asset class here to family offices by investing or going with us. So family offices are certainly one of our investor segments. And Wendell, I would love to have you on board if you want to partner and help us raise additional cash to fund our portfolio. We do look for seed funds, angels, high net worth individuals.
What's an angel?
To come on
Explain
board.
to people what an angel is.
And an angel, in essence, is someone who's in love with your business.
So that's me. I'm going to write you a check for $5 million.
Yes, please.
I become your angel.
Yes, you do.
Because I'm one of your very early adopters. I'm somebody that says, I get it. I like it. It makes sense. I'm going to give you early money. Now, since I'm going to give you early money, I'm going to be one of your original angels. I'm writing you a check for $5 million. What do I get that maybe most investors don't get? Do I get a favored nation status? Do I get a sidecar opportunity? Do I get a higher rate of return? Do I get an exit quicker? I'm a founder giving you $5 million. What extra benefits do I get?
You would get a lower valuation on the equity. So you would get a priority status in our cap table.
Okay.
That would obviously translate to higher dividends at the back end of our first portfolio.
Okay, I'm going to be asking for a lot more.
Yep.
All right. So Wendell, let
ahead.
me come back to
Let's
you.
discuss.
So how are you going to help Frank? Some of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of not only helping Frank and not only helping, Dr. Sam Perli, is I want to talk about industries that have amazing unicorn opportunities: finance, tech, telecommunications, logistics. So how are you going to help my two founders on my right and left? And I also want to talk about where some future unicorns might be. So how are you going to help these founders?
All right. So, I mean, Frank and I had a very honest conversation with you, Matthew, a couple of days ago, where I committed to investing in Frank's company. And just to kind of take a step back to angels, the best way, in my opinion, for family offices to get involved and learn the business, because you guys have obviously made a tremendous amount of money, but it may be in a family business as opposed to an investment structure, is to join angels groups. For example, I got my MBA at University of Notre Dame. There's a thing called Irish Angels. And Irish Angels allows you to invest alongside of other high net worth individuals, i.e. family offices, and look at different opportunities. As far as me helping Frank, usually an angel check is anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. So $5 million would be a lead investor. And I get to, if I gave Frank that, then I basically become Frank's boss. If I write him a check for $5 million.
So that's a great question. So you're writing that, angel check for $5 million. Besides some prefs that we already talked about and heard from Frank, what else would you want out of that founder? Because you are giving him this early seed money. So,
typically, again, an angel check's probably max going to be $50,000. But if you were to be a lead investor and write a check for $5 million, then you would require board seats. And
there we go.
The only thing that you would say on the board seat is basically you want to be on the quarterly meetings. You want to have access to their financials. You want to have access also to kind of just overall strategy, saying, hey, I'm familiar with Frank's business. Okay, well, you guys are going to buy these licenses for particular drugs. Hey, I read an interesting article in Wall Street Journal about this drug. Have you guys heard about it? Is that something that you would take a look at? So all it does is I basically get Frank's cell phone number and he has to take my phone call. Outside of that, they are the experts. And, I'm relying on them to make the right decision. And as to your second question, as far as, and I apologize, my laptop might die here. The charging stations aren't as good in Zurich as they are in the United States. So I do want to make this one final point, just in case I do drop off. When you are other very key industries here, and Frank, you can speak to this, and the other panelists, AI to me is a buzzword, but investing in AI is like saying, 20 years ago, I'm investing in the internet. Well, you can't invest in the internet. The internet in itself is just a tool that other companies
Good point.
use. So the reason that I like Frank's company is they are focusing on using AI in healthcare. So in biotech. So instead of the smartest people in the world that went to Harvard Medical School and Stanford Medical School, et cetera, instead of them doing trials 24/7, but they're only one person, they're going to use AI to do the same quality of trials, but they're going to be running an algorithm so that they can do it 24/7. And instead of one person doing it, it's going to be reflective of 1,000 people doing it. So that's why when
Right.
Frank and his business partner were telling their idea, my first question is, what is your minimum check? And then I like to know that number so that I can triple that number. So, it gives me a little bit more influence. So the companies that I look at as far as investing and the companies that I want to work with the founders, they're AI companies, they are machine learning companies, and then also companies that are not what I could kind of say B2C, which is business to consumer. I'm looking for companies that are business to business. So you are developing a software that Cisco is going to use, that Apple's going to use, that Netflix is
Nice.
going to use. So therefore, you
Yep.
have large contracts. And the biggest thing, keyword that I would like to just finally say is annual recurring revenue, not one-time revenue, because one-time revenue goes away at the end of this. What I look for in a business is I look at whatever revenue number they give me. They say we have 100 million in revenue. And then I will do a deep dive and say, actually, guys, that's only really 30 million of recurring revenue. And quite frankly, in VC, that's the only number that matters.
Really great point.
I have a
Let me
question.
ask you
I
something.
have a
and-
question, Matt.
wait,
Matt,
oh, sorry, Marty's got it.
Wendell, is there any verticals that you specialize in or that you like in particular?
Yeah, so we're industry agnostic. Outside of remember, so we work with 85 lenders, right? So I basically figure out what verticals the lenders like the most, but we love cybersecurity. Given what's happening in the world right now, cybersecurity is our number one industry that we target. Above all else, I go through PitchBook and I pull all cybersecurity companies, and I want to talk to those founders first. We love anything that's in aerospace. We just feel as though as technology continues to move, and the third thing that's going to be really obvious after I say it is logistics. We saw what happened
Yep.
in 2020 when the world shut down and ships were not able to get in goods and products and services. So any logistics company that is using software, AI, machine learning, and technology and moving from this arcane, okay, products are made in China, we need to get them to the US. How do we do that?
Yep.
It's not about creating blue collar jobs in the US. It's creating high tech software so that we're able to bring those products here, regardless of whether there's another COVID outbreak or if there's a war or something that disrupts the supply chain channel.
So let me just ask you one last question about that. So cybersecurity, I've got aerospace, I've got logistics. I want to know where do you find those three tranches more in the United States? You're finding them in Europe, you're finding them in South America, you're finding them in Asia. Where are those three big mostly found that you're looking for? So again, cybersecurity, aerospace, and logistics. Who's doing the best and where are they?
So, and I say this as an American, but I'm not being biased. They're in North America. So it's in the United States and it's in Canada. What I will say though, that Europe is trailing the United States as far as VC-backed startup, but Europe and a lot of even though the companies are based here, a lot of the engineers are coming out of Southeast Asia. A lot of the engineers are coming from Eastern Europe. So a lot of the talent is coming ex-US. But as far where the companies are founded, located, and operating out of, they're operating out of the US. And the reason for that is because the biggest VCs that can fund these companies, they're not going to fund a company in Indonesia, but they will fund a company that has a 70% workforce from Indonesia that's based in the United States.
So Yanni, let me ask you to pick this up. So we talked about the 51st state, which is Canada, right? Possibly coming in, as an investor. Talk to us a little bit about Europe. I mean, talk to us a little bit about Asia. I mean, it sounds like because you are a global firm at Alter Global, where are some of these really bright minds that you're seeing, some of these great VC-backed, businesses that you're going to help and you're going to help scale and grow? So talk a little bit about countries, because, VC has no barriers. VC has no tariffs. VC is open architecture. We're here to just fund and build great, brilliant businesses. Talk a little bit about Europe and Asia for us, if you would.
Absolutely. So I will preface by saying that I personally do not invest in Europe. That said, I've spent a lot of time with both family offices and funds in Europe. We still have a good relationship with all of them so that we can share interesting deal flow that perhaps is not a fit for our firm, but maybe for theirs. But in Europe, most of the opportunity today is still centralized between London, Paris, and a couple of other hotspots throughout. Most of the capital, though, sits in London, Paris, and then I would say probably Berlin is the third on that list. When it comes to the other markets where we see a lot of opportunity, of the ones that we invest in, and as just a reminder for us, that's Latin America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. Latin America is and has been over the last couple of years the furthest along when it comes to market maturity and the interesting opportunities present there today.
Which countries in Latin America are the farthest along? Which ones?
So Brazil is by far the most mature when it comes to venture capital investing and specifically technology development. After Brazil, closely following it, what I would say is Mexico, where I am now. And then typically third and fourth on that list is Colombia, Argentina. Chile has some really interesting bio development that they're doing. That is one segment that specifically Chilean companies often focus on. Uruguay has some. They have an excellent talent pool, but they're just such a small country that a lot of folks that want to build will ultimately leave and build from elsewhere in Latin America. But as far as the sectors from within these countries that we're seeing be the furthest along, fintech is the most interesting opportunity-wise for us today. So we invest a lot in fintech opportunities among a variety of subsegments. So it could be cross-border payment facilitation, it could be fintech lending, it could be AP, AR solutions for small, medium, larger corporates that don't necessarily have all of those functions currently digitized and running as efficiently as they could be. That is the first segment of opportunity that we invest in Latin America. And the second, and this is similar to Wendell's, we also see a lot of opportunity in logistics. So we personally have invested in what is essentially logistics and fulfillment infrastructure in companies in Colombia, Indonesia, and Egypt. Because as far as ecosystem hubs go, these are incredibly large markets that are expanding in terms of their e-commerce fulfillment and just e-commerce sales as a whole extremely rapidly. And so they represent the best opportunity for investment in these segments. So fintech and logistics are.
No, that's great, right? Because Wendell, cybersecurity, aerospace, you like logistics as well. Those three countries are amazing in Latin America. I've been to Africa 4 times. Just absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So tell me one or two businesses or ideas or a cyber company or an aerospace company or a logistics company. We'll talk about Africa, right? I mean, it doesn't get any bigger. It doesn't get any bolder. The populations don't get any bigger. Talk a little bit about what you see and pick on a country so we can kind of hear a little bit about what's going on.
Absolutely. So when it comes to Africa, there are 3 primary countries that have the largest volume of venture investment today. Those countries, are South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt. Fourth, I would put Kenya, and it's closely growing behind. It's just a little bit further behind in terms of its economic maturity today. In each of these countries, the same sectors that we spoke about a couple of minutes ago, so fintech and logistics, tend to be the furthest along when it comes from an entrepreneurial maturity standpoint and the kind of opportunity that is the most exciting to invest into. one of the companies that I touched on earlier is specifically in the e-commerce fulfillment space, and they're operating out of Egypt, but are also live in Saudi Arabia, for example. So speaking on that really like cross-market fit, but in the region as a
Love
whole,
it.
we have several investments in the fintech space in Nigeria and Egypt as well. One focused on digitizing, for example, invoice financing and in general, digitizing accounts payables and receivables. That's a company based out of Egypt called Olive. There's a really
Now, is Olive a
interesting.
public company or a private company?
No, it's a private seed stage company, so it's very, very new. And it's
Okay.
founded by one of the former managing partners of quite a large fund out of Egypt called Algebra Ventures. So that's a company that we invested in when it was pre-product, pre-anything, very early on.
Like it.
But because
Like it.
we feel confident about, frankly, the prior background of the founder team themselves, coming from the investor standpoint and spending many years in corporate. And that's one. Another company that we think is really interesting out of Nigeria is a company called Zone, Z-O-N-E. Zone is also a private company. It is Series A at this point in time. And Zone is
To explain to people what Series A means, just to help the family offices in the room that are new to venture capital.
Absolutely. So for anyone new to the space, typically the phases of funding, of financing through which private companies move prior to exiting in some capacity, be it an IPO or an acquisition or anything like that, is the rounds often go angel investment. So as Wendell shared, that's typically when folks are coming in and they're putting in 10K, 20K, 30K, smaller amounts of money into a company just for that company to get started. Then typically companies will raise a pre-seed round. And then subsequently, the sequencing is seed, Series A, B, C, D. There's no actual stopping point
Exit.
where
Right.
that could stop. You can keep going beyond that. You could go Series E, F, G. But usually you're hoping that at that point in time, you are already at, if not very close to, an exit opportunity. So
right, and that exit
Zone,
could be numerous ways. And let me just steal the ball from you for a
Please.
second, and let me go to the doctor here on my left. You have so many unique ideas, and we've just heard from everybody in the panelists about the rounds and how money is coming out, and what phases they like in cybersecurity and aerospace, and we just heard about 3 or 4 different countries, and we hear that VC is so global. Talk about how you see your space, but more importantly, talk about some of these molecular technology breakthroughs. Are we talking cancer? Are we talking oral health? We talking about busting up some of these childhood diseases that we see and eradicating them from the earth. What is it that you're seeing that's so cutting edge today?
Definitely. As much as, when you're investing, you have heard that sometimes there can be agnosticism in terms of the verticals that you're in. You're probably trying to find the most emerging technology, regardless of the domain it might be coming from. But if you are a venture studio, if you are building things from the scratch, there is more of a defined focus in how you build things. And especially for us at Thinkhat, we want to make sure we are building an ecosystem of companies that rely on each other. And that goes a long way if you are looking for longer plays, because a therapeutic company that you build can neatly dovetail with the healthcare company you might build. And with the connections that you establish for the sales in healthcare can actually enhance the sales that you do for a biotech firm and things like that. And so that's kind of where we play around, with maintaining our thesis within life sciences and biotech. Now, that being said, this is a great time to be in biotech and healthcare space. Many reasons, first, there is a shift even from the government. There is a Biosecure Act that is essentially trying to bring back a lot of biomanufacturing and biological design back to America. And
But my original question was, what are you eradicating? What diseases are you getting rid of? what are you fighting hard? Because there's just so many things we'd all love to just get rid of, through our lifetime as, children
Yeah.
into adults. But what are you working on right now? Like,
Exactly.
what particular area?
Yes. So for us, we are mainly looking at vaccine development for cancers. That's one main go-to-market strategy we have, because there's a lot of trials that are happening in that space right now. There's openness to using mRNA vaccines. So we are looking at cancer vaccines. That's
Nice.
one main domain we're looking at. We're also looking at aging and rejuvenation. Some of our own work, I was recruited to work in this lab, which eventually won the Nobel Prize for discovering the technology.
Who won the Nobel Prize?
It's a professor called Shinya Yamanaka, who was my mentor.
Great.
And he's also advising us in several things that we are doing at Thinkhat. And so the idea was that you could convert any cell into a stem cell. And you could, in the process, we've discovered not only could you convert a cell into a stem cell, you could actually make cells younger. You could take older cells and you can partially reprogram them, and they become younger versions of themselves. And so that's a big emphasis for us in terms of anti-aging. That's one area we are developing technologies for as well. Another area that is probably not as big at the moment, but we really anticipate will become very relevant, just as how the COVID pandemic has become, is antimicrobial resistance. That's another area.
So tell us what that means.
Yeah. Well, these days, when we are infected with a pathogen, we are taking antibiotics to help fight the
Okay, so
pathogen.
COVID would be one.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. And but also things even in older kind of diseases such as malaria, etc. We were treating them with antibiotics and overcoming and building resistance. And what's happening is that these bugs are smart, they're living, and they're learning to develop resistance against the antibiotics we have.
Okay, so how are we fighting them?
Exactly. So now what we are doing, especially even at Thinkhat, is developing ways of intervention against these antimicrobial resistant pathogens. And the way we are doing that is obviously by developing a different class altogether of interventions, not small molecules that don't learn like the bacteria can learn. We are using phage to develop a resistance against them. We are also developing even diagnostic techniques. If we can but detect these earlier than later, there is a huge play there. And so we are also developing diagnostics for antimicrobial resistance.
So how soon to market? Remember, your new fund,
Exactly.
I just gave you $5 million.
Exactly.
I'd like to see return of my dough.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? 2028, 3035? When do we see some of these cancer fighting, anti-age fighting, drugs come to market?
Yeah. So the cancer fighting ones are going to be much faster. We already have partnerships with pharma that are already putting some of these in clinical trials. So that'll be faster. The diagnostics would be faster because it's not a medication, it's diagnosing the medication, diagnosing the incidence of a disease. So that's going to be faster. The drugs that actually fight the antimicrobial, that'll be a little later because these are new classes of drugs.
So these drugs, and sorry for me sort of getting deeper, is, everybody in the room can afford it? Or would this be for, just certain hospitals would be able to administrate it? Or would this be something like I'd walk into CVS in 10 years, like I get my flu shot or my COVID shot and pick this up?
Yes, the RNA-based vaccines we are developing, etc., they will eventually become like the flu shots you can get from CVS, etc., because that's what happened with COVID. We are comfortable with that supply chain, and with the logistics developing, we'll get cold chains and whatever is needed to get the RNA medicine.
So we're talking about billion-dollar unicorn drugs.
Definitely.
Matt, I have a question to ask.
Yes, sir.
And it actually hits on something that Sam was talking about. And there was an article that came out 2 days ago, American Enterprise Institute, on this shift in supply chain. So we've been tied into DARPA for many years. And if you talk to people in any of the defense departments, they're all talking about the need to shift supply chain away from China. And can you guys all discuss about how that thinking impacts the way you invest in venture? And one example I'll give is that DARPA funded a pharmacy in a box, $80 million, to a guy who is a PhD from Johns Hopkins, a doctor, and was also in the armed forces. And he enables hospitals to create any off-patent drug in a assigned room in the hospital. Because today, every off-patent drug in the United States touches China one way or the other.
Great question. So, well, you know what? I like the question. What I'd like to do is just take this right around the horn. Hang on, Wendell, I see you. So why don't you attack it
Yeah.
first, and then we'll go to you, and then Wendell will go right around. So go right ahead, attack that
Yeah,
question.
so that goes to the first point I was making. Even the regulatory shift that's happening with the Biosecure Act, there's a lot of emphasis in bringing stuff back to America. And so for us as a venture studio, the way we've set it up is we are actually headquartered in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is part of America, but also it's a special development zone that America has set up. 19 of the top 30 pharmaceutical companies have a base in Puerto Rico, and the government gives a lot of incentives for us to do business in Puerto Rico. There's first of all, we don't pay any taxes developing technology there. Moreover, we get tax credit back for every dollar we spend. We get 50 cents back. And so as we see pharma developing, there's going to be, Puerto Rico is going to be a big winner, if things start coming back to America, etc. And we want to, we are very intentional in that way as to how we are building, what technology we're using. We're not partnering with companies in China as much as possible. We are developing here, or even maybe companies that are more friendlier to America, such as Israel or even India. Yeah.
So why don't you pick up on the question? So we're talking supply chain, we're talking about, development zones, bringing, drugs into the US, but again, not so much reliance on, say, Asia. How do you figure that into some of the businesses that you're working with?
So in the pharmaceutical industry and biotech in particular, it's really difficult to get around the globalization that has happened.
Get around it, hard to.
It's hard to. Over the last 2 decades, China has taken a dominant position there. We've seen even with some of the IP infringements that has been happening in China, that there's obviously a well-warranted worry about or concern about those breaches. And that has or is leading now to a shift away from China and moving into India and other geographies that can help do the drug development. And what's important here is that there's certainly the cost perspective, but there's certainly also the IP protection perspective that you need to consider when you do drug development. So from a drug development perspective, it's our view that you need to focus on ex-China geographies to make this happen. Whether that's in India as Sam,
Puerto Rico,
or Israel, to make your supply chain happen is not so important to us. The cost and more importantly, the capacity, availability perspective and capability, availability is certainly something that we consider.
So that is part of your business plan.
Yes, it is.
Oh, wait, Marty has something?
Hey, Matt, Tad Connelly has just joined. He's a doctor and an
I know
investor.
Tad. Absolutely. How are you? You're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, hold on. Is that better? All right.
Yes. Okay. So for everybody in the room, Stephen Conley, MD, general partner and co-founder at Boutique Ventures Partners, created something that I think all of us care about in the morning when we brush our teeth, is oral health care. And you worked on this particular mouthwash, which I read about online in your link. So thank you in your bio. Tell us about that mouthwash, how it's important, but more importantly for the family offices in this room, how are these family offices that invest in you or the firms that you invest in going to make money? How does that work? We all care about the capital going in. We care about the product coming out, but talk a little bit too, including obviously this mouthwash breakthrough and what it does. But more importantly, again, we're all here to be capitalists. Talk about that.
Yeah, thank you. Let me back up just a little bit. So I am actually trained as an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. I got my scrubs on today, so I'm still a functional maxillofacial surgeon.
By the way, his LinkedIn profile's got him in full scrub, so I love that.
So I actually have my DDS. I went to dental school at Columbia. Did my oral surgery training at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. Got my MD as part of that, and then I also have my PhD. I did studying oral cancer, so I'm a full professor at UCSF. Probably about 10-15 years ago, started advising startups. That turned into doing due diligence for different VC funds. And just before COVID, actually, a friend of mine who was a postdoc at Stanford, and a lot of experience there. We were kind of kicking it around and saying, well, we're doing all this stuff for other people. Let's do something for ourselves. And so we started Boutique Venture Partners as just before COVID. Started our fundraise just before COVID. And Fund One, we just closed about 6 months ago with 18 portfolio companies that we're very proud of. We just started Fund Two, where we're actively in the fundraising stage, and I think our biggest value is that we are super close to medicine, dentistry, medical research. We can deal source like nobody's business. We have that smell test, which is
Yeah.
our superpower, and so that's led us to a lot of really good deals. Yeah.
So let me ask you to back up. Let's talk about oral health. What did you create? What does this mouthwash
Yep.
do? And is it available?
Absolutely. So the mouthwash is called Gingivi, Gengyve. So I do a lot of collaboration. That's kind of part of the game. And 5 years ago, a friend of mine from Milan, Italy, we asked each other, was there a mouthwash that we like to recommend to our patients? And we looked at the market. We wrote some papers and things like that, like academics do. And there wasn't one that we liked. And so we said, well, let's go to work and make one. And so that's how Gingivi was born. It's got the trick, the secret in the sauce is the ingredients, including hyaluronic acid, which is hydrating and healing. So we all have hyaluronic acid in our body all over, and it's a very important part of our tissues. But what it does in the mouth is it helps, along with this other ingredient called pullulan. It helps to form a physical barrier, and so that helps protect your mouth. If you have surgery, if you have implants, wisdom tooth, it helps to heal the mouth. If you have dry
Wow.
mouth, it helps to keep your mouth moist. And
So let me ask you a question about money. What were your sales to date?
so we just launched really about 3 months ago. So sales, we're doing about 20,000 a month at the moment.
Good for
And
you.
we've got that, that you talk about the ARR, and so we always like to build in a subscription. So we have a pretty robust subscription service built up now, and we're online at www.gingiveusa.com, and really looking to build it out as a platform, because mouth health is connected to systemic health, everything else. So
Brilliant.
specifically mouth health and gut health, and sports performance.
Let me interrupt you. Marty, go ahead.
Hey, Matt, Wendell's got to leave. Can he make 2 points before he leaves?
Wendell, make your 2 points.
Sorry, guys, I have a hard stop at 2. It's actually 3 points. One, getting back to the Africa point that we were discussing quickly, the other huge industry there that I sent to a lender who is doing the deal, because we can't work in Africa as yet, is anything in recyclable. So all of the clothes that you buy on Instagram and you only wear once because they shrink because they come from China, that all gets shipped to Africa. And when it gets shipped to Africa, it usually ends up in water and pollution, and so there's a company now that is making tons of money because they are recycling those clothing, and then they're rebranding it and they're putting it back into the US and they're reselling it, but they're reselling it using it as fiber. It's actually an Italian company that's doing it. They're exporting all of the leftover clothes from Africa, putting it through a process. So that's just something about, kind of a point about Africa. To Marty's
Okay,
point, which I
and
think is
number
extremely,
2.
yeah, extremely important about the supply chain moving from China. One is, and I know we're in California, so I won't go too much in my political stance here, but Donald Trump is always talking about tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. And people, what they think of when they say tariffs, they think like everything's going to be more expensive. That's not the case. When you have tariffs, it allows these tech companies to say, okay, we want to keep the prices low in the United States. There's going to be tariffs on China, let's come up with innovative ways to reduce the need on China. So right now, what I'm looking for are founders that are saying, hey, tariffs are coming come January 20th.
Yep.
Huge tariffs
Yep.
against China. So what companies are solving the issue of we no longer going to be importing goods from China? How can we get around that? And the easiest way to do that is what I mentioned before. I look for companies where the majority of their workers are ex-US. Because if your workers are in Indonesia, if your workers are in Singapore, if your workers are in Philippines, Vietnam, those are all US friendly countries that are close to China and are able to export the same goods, same quality, if not better quality, and therefore you can get around using China. So those are kind of my final
Okay, so
2
you've got
points.
recycle, you've got supply chain, you've got tariffs. Are those your 3 points that you wanted to discuss?
Those are the 3 points. And Marty,
And-
thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this. Matthew, thanks for the pre-call.
Of course.
I look forward to joining the next one. I think it's either in New York, and I'll definitely be at Formula One Miami. I'll be the guy waving the checkered flag at the end.
So, Yana, let's go back to you and talk about
Do
supply
we have a
chain.
question?
Oh.
Wendell, there's a question for you.
Wendell has a hard stop at 2.
Go ahead. I'll answer the question. Go ahead.
What's the interest rate that you charge?
Can you repeat the question?
Right here.
What is the loss ratio?
What's the interest rate and loss ratio? What's your interest rate and loss ratio?
So I'm in venture debt. Our loss ratio is less than 4%. Because remember, venture debt gets paid first. So Silicon Valley Bank, which was the largest bank in venture debt during the financial crisis of 2008 to 2010, their loss ratio was 8.2%. So that was in the worst market since the Great Depression, 8.2%. On average, this is all publicly traded, you can just read their 10Ks. On average, if you look at Hercules, which is publicly traded, Trinity, which is publicly traded, and Triple Point, which is publicly traded, their loss ratio is less than 4%. So family offices, you made a bunch of money, you don't want to lose money. Venture debt is a way to get access to these companies. You get to look under the hood, and then you get to participate in their next equity round because you know what they do debt-wise. So
Wendell, what is your rate? And do you take warrants as well?
So remember, I'm not a lender. I'm a go-between. But the rates right now in venture debt are anywhere from 7% up to 28%. Warrants are typically part of deals, but because we build a competitive situation, I put lenders in competition with each other. So the last deal that we just did, the founder wanted $10 million. We got him $20 million. We have Eastward Partners and SVB. They're pari passu. SVB never does pari passu deals, which means that they're sharing the deal equally. Eastward is running the deal. SVB is second. The interest rate on that deal was 11%. There's 0.25 warrant coverage, and the prepayment penalty ends at the end of 2 years. So that's our whole thing. We make it competitive. Lenders love us because we bring them deals. Lenders hate us because they're going to have to give us the least expensive deal that they'll write all year.
One last question. What kind of collateral you have?
What kind of collateral do you have?
These are airball loans. So we don't have any collateral because these companies are tech companies. They don't have real estate. All they have is printers, desk, and everything else. So we're not the lender. The lender has to worry about underwriting this. We just find the lenders that are willing to do these deals. And since I go out to 85 lenders, if they don't do it, someone else will.
Right, so they move on. So Wendell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Sorry for taking so much time.
Thank you for your amazing company at AmCap.
All right,
Matt,
thank
we
you
got
guys.
about 10 minutes. 10
Great.
minutes.
So let me move back to Yana. I know we were talking supply chain. I know we were talking about the development zones. I'll let you touch on that because your fund and what you do is global. But I also want to go back to the businesses inside your fund, and I want to know about their defensible business models. So let's just talk quickly about the supply chain because you are global and you see things better than most do. I think you have a very interesting lens. And then I want to hear about some of those companies that have really strong defensible business models.
Sure. My point, frankly, in terms of the globalization piece is very simple. our fund specifically chose to invest in markets that are historically undercapitalized because we think that from a macroeconomic perspective, also just if we put China to the side for a second and think purely about macro factors like the rate of population growth, the growth in internet penetration, the rise of e-commerce, the more and more friendly regulations in place in these markets that we're investing in, all of it signals that these markets will play an increasingly outsized role in terms of global economies. And it only then makes sense to invest in them relative to, for example, investing in China, which is going to face a pretty meaningful constriction before it comes out into a new phase in the next decade. So for us, from a market perspective, it frankly only makes sense to continue investing where we are and hold off on investing into companies in China. Thinking about companies within our own portfolio, remind me, Matthew, which part exactly do you want me to drill into?
What family offices, have asked in the past is, okay, I'm in a fund, you've got 17 businesses. How do we know that each one of those businesses has a defensible business model? How do you, as somebody that's looking under the hood, make sure that it's defensible, that you can continue to make revenue? How do you know that that business model and their product is defensible?
Absolutely. Great question. So first of all, there's a degree of diligence that is on us to do before the investment ever takes place. So we need to make sure that we know the space incredibly well before we ever put any of an LP's precious capital that we are a real fiduciary of to work. And that requires a lot of analysis. It's speaking to the current customers that are live in that market. It's speaking to potential competitors that could come up. It's speaking to businesses that are operating, frankly, in a tangential field, but we think might expand into a given segment in the future. So that's pre-work for us to do. Once we make the investment, we're speaking with those companies at a bare minimum on a monthly basis, but frankly, with a lot of them much more frequently. And we're getting quantitative updates on their performance. We are actually physically going and spending time with their teams. We are tracking their performance over time and reporting on that back to our LPs so that they can see the evolution of these companies and their growth. When we are concerned about something, like we are taking on the responsibility to help those companies with business development. We're speaking also to the other investors on the company so that we can make sure that if it's not only us, but it's us in conjunction with others, we're working on boosting that company up. And then the last piece is that as investors in venture capital, we also do have to absorb a good amount of risk in that within a given portfolio, not all companies will succeed. That's a given. And we have to internalize that quickly, as do LPs, because I think it's important to know the nuances of the asset class that you're investing into. But how it affects our behavior as then the investors is that we are considering from the get-go, if we end up in a scenario where we can't necessarily exit the company through an IPO or a meaningful M&A, then can we at least be working on, in the background, thinking on who could potentially acquire this company, if not for a 50x return, then for a 10x, or even potentially smaller, where we'll still return the capital and more. It might not be the exponential exit, but are we doing the diligence ahead of time as well to prepare who those potential buyers could be? And that includes us going out and speaking to the potential competitors in that space. Not every segment is also winner takes all. I think that's worth mentioning. There are some segments of different sectors, even within fintech, where truthfully, if you can't take the majority of the market, it's unlikely that you will ultimately build a large enough company where the venture returns will make sense. But for example, thinking of this company that I'm diligencing here right now in Mexico, if they serve one customer and specifically 10% of their volume, that's still a transacting volume of 20 million a month. And now let's say their take rate of that is 1%. that on its own isn't going to return the capital. But if you think of that being one of their client among dozens, all of a sudden that actually presents a really lucrative opportunity. And for a lot of customers, they want to work with a variety of players that can facilitate that too, because it's redundancy in a good way. It's risk mitigation in that sense. So really, it's down to us making sure that we can do the work beforehand to really know specifically in this given segment, how much of a risk is it to invest in a company that will have other competitors? If it's a segment that does, then do we think that this company has enough defensibility within it in the underlying business model and how they're approaching it and their economics as well? Or if the defensibility is not necessarily as critical because we don't believe that it's winner take all, then how strong do we think this initial wedge is? And do we think that the pipeline, the product development roadmap that the company has in place and how they're going to access future revenue streams, additional customers, et cetera, is strong enough to be able to support that over time? So those are the factors that we're looking at.
Those are so important. So let me sort of take this to you, Frank. Talk about competitive intelligence. I mean, you're going to put money out into different firms. You're going to JV with them later and split profits. You're going to take the IP. But tell me a little bit about your competitive intelligence. How are you going out there and not only looking at what's in your stable of companies, but what else is going on out there? So that's one of my two questions I'd like to talk to you about is how you build this, but really more importantly, how are you keeping up with the competitive intelligence around the businesses already in your portfolio?
Right. Good question, Matt. So what we do is pretty much what Yana described. We do a diligence effort, rigorous diligence effort on the scientific aspects of it. Will it work? Will it not work? Which is really a binary potential outcome. But then on top of that, you need to have your commercial considerations. And in that effort, we actually utilize AI to speed up the intelligence gathering and processing.
There we go.
And that cuts away not only the need for actual people to do the work, but certainly also reduces the speed to generate intelligence of quality. We obviously look at it and quality review it after it's been generated, but that's really what we utilize, and we're cutting away. A typical competitive intelligence effort would typically take 2 to 3 people for anywhere from a week to a month, and we cut that completely out of the equation.
Would you use outside investigators? Would you hire a company that is really good at maybe sourcing, unearthing things that you might not see? Would you ever hire a specialty company that's just really good at finding out a little bit more about a business or an individual or a product? Would you spend money on that?
Well, the specificity of our industry is that everything is publicly disclosed in big databases like clinicaltrials.gov. You can pretty much go in and see what's happening. In
hiring researchers?
So our AI actually goes into that database, retrieves the information, what's going on, what's competing with what we have in our portfolio, and what is the likelihood of that reaching the market, when will it reach, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so let me ask a question about your firm. Oh, we have 2 minutes. Let me just if you can answer quickly, sure. And then Yana, I'm going to come to you. How are you structured? Tell me about your team. Tell me about the roles. And how many new employees have you put on in the last year?
Right. So we're a founding team of 5 people, industry veterans, different profiles. Co-founder Jason here has an AI background in therapeutics development. I myself have a finance background, a strategy background. We've got a chief scientific officer, 30 years of drug development expertise, brought 27 assets into the clinic. We've got a PE fund manager in our founding team. We've got an industry veteran with a track record at Eli Lilly sitting with us. So an impressive team, founding team.
Yep.
We haven't bolstered the team yet with additional resources. We rely on an external advisory council both in terms of commercial diligence, but also scientific diligence, which is in excess of 50.
And last question, where do you want to be? Do you want to be at five employees and stay there? You're thinking about 10, 15? What's your growth trajectory?
It's going to be north of 20 in 2 years from now.
Perfect. So let me come back to you, Yana. Structured, how many people, how many roles, who was the last employee hired or type of individual hired?
Yes, there are 6 of us globally distributed. I think in terms of our size, we actually prefer to stay roughly in this scale or maybe just be a tiny bit larger. We think that both from an economics perspective and from ability to frankly get the most amount of work done, we think the smaller team structure works very well. We all come from slightly similar backgrounds in that all of us started our careers in traditional corporate environments. I personally worked at a Fortune 200 firm in New York as a product manager for many years. And then several of us also spent time working in the startup ecosystem as a whole in various stages of companies before going into venture. So all of us have a range of experience either in product or engineering or consulting before coming into venture. And frankly, this is, I think, the most exciting place for us to operate because it's a combination of a little bit of quantitative work, but frankly, a lot more of it, given our stage of investing, is qualitative. So making sure that we know the sectors really well and are able to build the most effective, long-term, mutually reciprocal relationships with founders and other firms, such that we can do our jobs well over the next decade.
So Dr. Connelly, a little bit about you too, because, love the mouthwash idea. Love the idea that, you're doing $20,000 a month with this new product, and your background is so deep in terms of, your experience and your partner's experience. What does the staffing look like for you going forward and the growth and the size of your company?
Right. So right now we've been running things on 3 people. Going forward, probably double that in a couple of years. The strength of who we are is that, healthcare is so specified and technologically deep, is that most of the time we're not going to know everything, of course. And the strength of our team is that we can go to the world expert who will actually talk to us. And we will ask them about the sector. We will ask because they will know that's their thing, right? And so we can say we can go to the expert at Stanford or UCSF or Harvard, MIT, wherever that person is. We can go and have that conversation and proof out the underlying technology to these healthcare deals because they require an extensive understanding. And then we take that as a basis to move forward and look at the business part and look at everything else that'll make that happen. But if you start out not on good footing with or not on a good foundation with understanding what you've got, then you're sort of on a house of cards. And that's I think more than anything our strength. But the other thing is that we tend, because who we are is de-risk these healthcare deals that other funds don't understand and aren't comfortable with. Well, but they like it, and so a lot of times, yep.
I was just going to ask you one last question because Marty wants to bring on the next panel. If you could, without worrying about money, worrying about cost, and you could put one more new member on your team, what would their specialty or expertise be?
Probably somewhere with a PE background in M&A.
Got it. Marty, all yours.
Fantastic. We're going to have an M&A panel next. So great job.